The year was 2147, and humanity had stretched its reach far beyond Earth. The stars were no longer distant points of light, but destinations for exploration, trade, and even conquest. Yet, with every step forward, came challenges that tested the limits of human morality and resilience. Captain Daniel Carter stood silently on the bridge of the SS Aegis, a military transport ship designed to ferry prisoners to one of the most remote penal colonies in known space. His mission was simple: deliver the cargo, human prisoners, and return to base. But as he stared out at the endless void through the reinforced viewport, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this assignment wasn't quite right. The journey to Kepler 9c had been long and uneventful, but the monotony did little to ease his growing unease. Among the prisoners was Rachel Monroe, a former engineer whose crimes were whispered about in hushed tones among the crew. Espionage against the unified government was no small charge, and her presence aboard the ship had sparked more than a few rumors. Some said she had stolen classified designs for advanced weaponry. Others claimed she had sold secrets to a rival faction. Whatever the truth, Rachel was now just another face in the crowd of criminals destined for exile. Daniel turned away from the viewport and glanced at Lieutenant Laura Bennett, his second-in-command. She was seated at the communications console, her fingers moving deftly over the holographic interface. Laura was efficient and loyal, qualities Daniel valued deeply, but there was something guarded in her demeanor lately. He had noticed it during briefings and casual conversations, a hesitancy as if she were holding back information. It made him uneasy, though he couldn't pinpoint why. "Anything new from command?" Daniel asked, breaking the silence. Laura looked up briefly before shaking her head. "Nothing unusual, just routine updates. We're still on schedule to arrive at the facility in 6 hours." Daniel nodded but didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked over to the tactical display, where a three-dimensional map of the region was projected. The penal colony on Kepler 9c was located in a desolate area, surrounded by jagged alien terrain that seemed almost hostile in its appearance. The planet's atmosphere was breathable, barely, but the surface was barren and unwelcoming. It was the perfect place to isolate those deemed too dangerous or inconvenient for society. "What do you know about the facility?" Daniel asked, keeping his tone casual. Laura paused, her hands hovering above the console. For a moment she seemed unsure how to answer. Finally she shrugged. "It's a prison, high security, nothing special." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "That's all? No details?" "It's classified," Laura replied quickly, perhaps too quickly. "You know how it is. The less we know, the better." Daniel frowned but let the matter drop. He trusted Laura, but her evasiveness only fueled his suspicions. There was something about this mission that didn't add up, and he intended to find out what it was. As the SS Aegis entered Kepler 9c's orbit, the crew prepared for landing. The prisoners were gathered in the holding bay, their wrists bound by magnetic restraints. They shuffled forward reluctantly, their faces a mix of resignation and defiance. Rachel caught Daniel's eye as she passed, her expression unreadable. There was a quiet strength in her gaze, a determination that hinted at a deeper story beneath the surface. Daniel wondered what she had done to end up here, and whether she truly deserved her fate. The descent to the planet's surface was smooth, guided by autopilot systems that ensured precision, despite the harsh conditions outside. As they approached the facility, Daniel leaned forward in his seat, studying the structure below. From a distance, it appeared like any other high-security installation, towering walls, watchtowers, and automated defense systems. But as they drew closer, he noticed subtle differences. The layout was irregular, with sections extending underground in ways that suggested expansion beyond its original design. Surveillance drones patrolled the perimeter tirelessly, their movements precise and mechanical. When the ship touched down, the ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the stark landscape beyond. A biting wind carried dust and grit across the barren ground, stinging exposed skin. Daniel stepped off the ship first, followed by Laura, and a squad of armed guards. Waiting for them was Warden Harold Klein, a tall, imposing figure with sharp features and cold eyes. His uniform was immaculate, every crease and insignia perfectly aligned, exuding authority and control. "Captain Carter," Klein greeted him with a curt nod. "Welcome to Facility K9C. "Warden Klein," Daniel replied, returning the gesture. "Thank you for receiving us." Klein's gaze swept over the prisoners being led off the ship, lingering briefly on Rachel before moving on. "Your delivery is expected. We'll handle the rest." Daniel hesitated, sensing an opportunity to press for answers. "If you don't mind me asking, what exactly happens to the prisoners once they're inside?" Klein's expression hardened, slightly, though his voice remained calm. "They're processed, assigned quarters, and put to work. This facility operates under strict guidelines set by the unified government. Rest assured, everything is above board." Something in Klein's tone struck Daniel as rehearsed, as if he had delivered the same response countless times before. Still, he nodded politely and stepped aside, allowing the guards to escort the prisoners into the facility. As Rachel passed, she glanced back at Daniel once more, her eyes locking onto his for a fleeting moment. There was a question in her gaze, unspoken yet palpable, and Daniel felt a pang of unease. Once the prisoners were secured inside, Klein led Daniel and Laura to a briefing room within the compound. The interior was utilitarian, with dull gray walls and sparse furnishings. A large screen dominated one wall, displaying live feeds from various parts of the facility. Klein gestured for them to sit, then took his place at the head of the table. "I assume you have questions," Klein began, folding his hands neatly in front of him. "Ask them now while you have the chance." Daniel exchanged a glance with Laura before speaking. "What kind of work are the prisoners assigned to? And why is this facility so isolated?" Klein's lips twitched into a faint smile, though it lacked warmth. "The nature of their tasks varies depending on skills and behavior. As for the location..." He paused, leaning back in his chair. "Let's just say it serves a dual purpose. Isolation ensures security, both for the prisoners and for the projects conducted here." "Projects?" Daniel echoed, his curiosity piqued. "What kind of projects?" Klein's smile faded, replaced by a steely resolve. "Classified. Suffice it to say, they are vital to the survival of humanity in this galaxy. Now, unless you wish to extend your stay indefinitely, I suggest you focus on completing your mission and returning to your post." The warning was clear, leaving no room for further inquiry. Daniel clenched his jaw but forced himself to nod. Whatever secrets lay hidden within these walls, uncovering them would require subtlety and patience, qualities he wasn't sure he possessed. Later that evening, after retiring to temporary quarters, Daniel found himself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The day's events replayed in his mind, each detail raising more questions than answers. Laura's reluctance to share information, Klein's cryptic remarks, and Rachel's enigmatic gaze all pointed to a larger mystery waiting to be unraveled. Little did he know, the truth was far darker and closer than he could have imagined. Outside, the wind howled against the facility's walls, carrying whispers of secrets buried deep beneath the alien soil. Somewhere within those confines, the real reason human prisoners were held in separate facilities awaited discovery. And Daniel Carter, whether he realized it or not, was about to become part of something much bigger than himself. The first full day at Facility K9C began with a sense of unease that Daniel Carter couldn't shake. The accommodations provided for him and his crew were functional but sparse, offering little comfort beyond the bare necessities. The walls were cold and gray, the air tinged with a faint metallic smell that seemed to seep into everything. It wasn't just the environment that made Daniel uneasy, it was the people. The guards stationed at the facility moved with mechanical precision, their faces devoid of emotion. Even Warden Klein's demeanor exuded an unsettling detachment, as if he viewed the prisoners not as humans, but as tools to be used and discarded. Breakfast in the mess hall offered no relief. The food was bland and unappetizing, served in prepackaged containers that reminded Daniel of rations distributed during wartime. He sat alone at a corner table, picking at his meal while observing the room. The other members of his crew mingled quietly, though their conversations lacked energy. Lieutenant Laura Bennett entered shortly after, her usual composed expression marred by a flicker of tension. She joined Daniel without saying a word, sliding into the seat across from him. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Neither did you," Daniel replied, glancing up at her. "What's going on here, Laura? Why does everyone act like they're guarding state secrets?" Laura hesitated, her fork hovering over her untouched food. For a moment, Daniel thought she might brush off the question like she had before. Instead, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "This place isn't what it seems. I've heard things, rumors, but nothing concrete." "What kind of rumors?" Daniel pressed, keeping his tone steady despite the rising curiosity gnawing at him. She glanced around cautiously before continuing. "Some say the prisoners aren't just here to serve time. They're part of experiments. Dangerous ones. But I don't know anything for sure. Just be careful, okay?" Before Daniel could respond, one of the guards approached their table. His uniform bore insignias unfamiliar to Daniel, and his presence felt intrusive. "Captain Carter," the guard said stiffly. "Warden Klein requests your presence in the observation deck." Daniel exchanged a quick glance with Laura before nodding. "Tell him I'll be there shortly." Once the guard left, Laura gave Daniel a pointed look. "Be careful," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't ask too many questions." Daniel stood up, leaving his half-eaten breakfast behind. As he made his way to the observation deck, he couldn't help but notice how quiet the corridors were. The only sounds came from the rhythmic hum of machinery and the occasional echo of footsteps. Even the surveillance drones overhead seemed unusually attentive, their lenses following his every move. When he arrived at the observation deck, Warden Klein was already waiting. The room was dominated by a massive window overlooking a vast courtyard, where prisoners were being led in groups to perform various tasks. Klein gestured for Daniel to stand beside him, his hands clasped firmly behind his back. "I trust your stay has been satisfactory so far," Klein began, his tone polite but distant. "It's adequate," Daniel replied, choosing his words carefully. "Though I must admit I'm still unclear about the purpose of some of these activities." Klein's lips curled into a thin smile. "Efficiency is key. Every prisoner contributes to the functioning of this facility. Their labor ensures we maintain order and progress." Progress. The word lingered in Daniel's mind, heavy with implication. He watched as a group of prisoners worked on repairing a damaged section of the outer wall. Among them was Rachel Monroe, her movements deliberate and focused. Despite the harsh conditions, she carried herself with a quiet determination that set her apart from the others. "Why are certain areas restricted?" Daniel asked suddenly, recalling the sections of the facility marked off limits during their initial tour. "If the prisoners are merely working, why keep parts of the base hidden?" Klein's smile faded, replaced by a steely gaze. "Security. Protocols dictate which areas remain classified. Your clearance does not extend to such matters, Captain." The response was expected yet frustrating. Daniel nodded curtly, deciding not to push further, for now. Instead, he turned his attention back to the courtyard, searching for any clue that might shed light on the facility's true purpose. Later that afternoon, Rachel found herself assigned to a work detail outside the main compound. Alongside a small group of inmates, she was tasked with repairing a damaged energy conduit buried beneath the rocky terrain. The job was tedious and physically demanding, but Rachel welcomed the distraction. It gave her time to think and to observe. As she knelt to inspect the conduit, her eyes caught sight of strange markings etched into the ground nearby. At first glance, they appeared natural, like cracks formed by erosion. But upon closer inspection, Rachel realized they were deliberate, symbols carved into the rock with precision. They didn't match any language she recognized, human or alien. Intrigued, she traced the patterns with her fingers, committing them to memory. "What are you doing?" a voice whispered sharply behind her. Rachel turned to see Marcus Lane, another inmate, crouched beside her. His wiry frame and sharp features gave him an almost feral appearance, but his eyes betrayed a keen intelligence. Marcus had earned a reputation among the prisoners as someone who knew how to survive no matter the cost. "These symbols," Rachel murmured, gesturing toward the markings. "Do you recognize them?" Marcus frowned, leaning closer to examine the carvings. "Never seen anything like it. Looks alien, though." Before they could discuss it further, the sound of approaching footsteps forced them to return to their task. A guard barked orders, urging the group to hurry. Rachel reluctantly obeyed, but her mind raced with possibilities. What were these symbols doing here? And why had they been hidden away? That evening, after returning to the facility, Rachel sought out Marcus again. They met in a dimly lit corner of the communal area, away from prying eyes. "I think those symbols mean something," Rachel said quietly. "Something important." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You think they're connected to whatever's going on here?" "It's possible," Rachel replied. "But we need more information. If we can figure out what they represent, maybe we can find a way out of this place, or expose what's really happening." Marcus hesitated, weighing the risks. "If we get caught snooping around, they'll make an example of us. You sure this is worth it?" Rachel met his gaze steadily. "Do you want to spend the rest of your life rotting in here?" "Because I don't." After a long pause, Marcus nodded. "All right, but we do this smart. No rushing in blind." While Rachel and Marcus plotted their next move, Daniel continued to piece together fragments of the puzzle. That night, unable to sleep, he wandered the facility's corridors, hoping to stumble upon something, anything that might explain the strangeness surrounding him. His path eventually led him to an administrative wing, where he spotted Laura, speaking privately with Warden Klein. Their conversation ended abruptly when they noticed him approaching. Laura quickly excused herself, brushing past Daniel with a strained smile. Klein, however, remained where he was, his expression unreadable. "Captain Carter," Klein said coolly. "Lost?" "Just stretching my legs," Daniel replied, forcing a casual tone. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly fine," Klein assured him, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "Though I'd advise against wandering too far. This facility has strict rules for a reason." Daniel nodded, feigning compliance, but his suspicions deepened. Whatever Laura and Klein had been discussing, it wasn't routine protocol. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel resolved to dig deeper, even if it meant risking his own safety. Back in the barracks, Rachel lay awake, replaying the events of the day in her mind. The symbols, Marcus's cautious agreement, and the oppressive atmosphere of the facility all pointed to a sinister reality lurking beneath the surface. She didn't know what awaited them, but one thing was certain: staying silent wasn't an option. Somewhere in the depths of Facility K9C, answers waited to be uncovered, and whether through courage, desperation, or sheer willpower, both Rachel and Daniel were inching closer to discovering the truth, one dangerous step at a time. The next morning brought a tension that seemed to hang in the air like a storm waiting to break. Daniel Carter woke early, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. The conversation he had overheard, or rather, stumbled upon, between Laura and Warden Klein gnawed at him. What were they hiding? And why did it feel like everyone around him was walking on eggshells? Breakfast was another somber affair. The mess hall buzzed with low murmurs from the crew of the SS Aegis, but no one dared speak too loudly or ask probing questions. Laura avoided Daniel's gaze entirely, her usual confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic nervousness. When she finally approached him after the meal, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Daniel," she began, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "You need to stop asking questions. Whatever you think is going on here, it's bigger than you realize." Her words only fueled his determination. "Then tell me what's really happening, Laura. You owe me that much." She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. "I can't." Not yet. Just trust me when I say this place isn't safe. For anyone. Before Daniel could press further, a guard interrupted them, summoning Laura to assist with prisoner logistics. She gave him one last, pleading look before hurrying away, leaving Daniel more frustrated than ever. He knew she was holding back, but why? And how far was she willing to go to protect whatever secrets this facility harbored? Meanwhile, Rachel Monroe and Marcus Lane had begun piecing together their own investigation. During their work assignments, they took every opportunity to gather information. The strange symbols Rachel had discovered outside the compound weighed heavily on her mind. She sketched them onto scraps of paper whenever she had a moment alone, trying to make sense of their meaning. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fencing near the restricted zone, Rachel spotted something unusual. Beyond the barbed wire and surveillance drones lay a cluster of buildings partially buried underground. Unlike the rest of the facility, these structures appeared hastily constructed, their exteriors scarred with scorch marks and patched repairs. Guards patrolled the area constantly, their weapons drawn and ready. "What do you think is in there?" Marcus asked, following her gaze. "I don't know," Rachel admitted, keeping her voice low. "But I'm going to find out." That night, under the cover of darkness, Rachel and Marcus slipped away from the barracks. Moving silently through the shadows, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the facility until they reached the perimeter fence. The guards stationed nearby were distracted, chatting idly as they leaned against a wall. Taking advantage of the moment, Rachel and Marcus crawled beneath the fence and darted toward the mysterious buildings. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of ozone and burnt metal. The walls hummed faintly, vibrating with an energy that made Rachel's skin prickle. They moved cautiously, avoiding the few guards who roamed the halls. In one room, they found rows of equipment unlike anything Rachel had seen before. Massive machines lined the walls, their surfaces etched with glowing runes that pulsed in sync with a low, rhythmic thrumming sound. At the center of the room stood a containment chamber, a towering cylinder filled with swirling blue light. Rachel stared at it, mesmerized. The light seemed alive, shifting and twisting in patterns that defied logic. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. "What is this place?" Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Rachel replied, though her instincts screamed danger. "But whatever it is, it's not meant for us." Before they could investigate further, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Rachel and Marcus froze, realizing they had triggered some kind of security system. Footsteps echoed down the hallway as guards rushed toward their location. "We need to go. Now," Marcus urged, grabbing Rachel's arm. They sprinted back the way they came, dodging patrols and narrowly avoiding detection. By the time they reached the fence, their hearts pounded with adrenaline. Slipping back into the barracks undetected felt impossible, but they managed it, collapsing onto their bunks just as the guards began conducting sweeps. Back in his quarters, Daniel wrestled with his conscience. Laura's warning replayed in his mind, clashing with his growing certainty that something unethical was happening here. He couldn't ignore the evidence any longer: the guarded conversations, the restricted areas, the prisoners' deteriorating health. Something sinister lurked beneath the surface of Facility K9C, and he needed answers. Later that evening, Daniel decided to confront Laura again. He found her in the communications room, hunched over a console and typing furiously. Her expression softened when she saw him, though traces of guilt lingered in her eyes. "Laura," Daniel said firmly, closing the door behind him, "I need to know the truth." She sighed, rubbing her temples as if bracing herself for what was to come. "All right, but if I tell you, you have to promise not to act rashly." Daniel nodded, though he wasn't sure he could keep that promise. Laura took a deep breath before speaking. "This facility isn't just a prison, it's a testing ground. Scientists here are experimenting with alien technology we don't fully understand. The prisoners? They're test subjects." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. "Test subjects for what?" "For survival," Laura explained, her voice heavy with regret. "The unified government wants to adapt humans to thrive in hostile environments. They've been using alien devices to alter biology, making soldiers immune to radiation, extreme temperatures, even biological warfare. But the process is unstable. Most subjects suffer horrific side effects. Some die. Daniel's stomach churned as the pieces fell into place. The strange illnesses among the prisoners, the secrecy surrounding the restricted zones. It all made sense now. "Why haven't you reported this?" he demanded. "Because I'd be branded a traitor," Laura shot back. "And so would you. The higher-ups don't care about ethics, all they care about is results." Daniel clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "We can't let this continue." "You think I don't know that?" Laura snapped, her composure cracking. "But what can we do? If we expose this, they'll silence us and anyone else who tries to help." As the argument unfolded, Rachel sat quietly in the barracks, sketching the symbols she had memorized earlier. She didn't know what they meant, but she suspected. They were connected to the experiments. Deep down, she knew she couldn't face this alone. She needed allies, people brave enough to stand against the injustice unfolding within these walls. Rachel's thoughts turned to Daniel. There was something about him, a quiet strength that suggested he might be different from the others. If anyone could help her uncover the truth, it was him. The following day, tensions reached a breaking point. Several prisoners began exhibiting alarming symptoms: rapid aging, physical deformities, and erratic behavior. Some collapsed during work assignments, their bodies unable to withstand the strain. Medics rushed to treat them, but their efforts seemed futile. Rachel watched as chaos unfolded around her, her resolve hardening. She knew the time to act was now. That night, she approached Marcus with a plan. "We need to sabotage the machine," she said. "If we disable it, maybe we can stop the experiments." Marcus frowned, clearly skeptical. "Even if we succeed, how will we get the word out? No one's going to believe us." "We'll record everything," Rachel insisted. "Evidence, proof of what's happening here. Once we have it, we'll find a way to broadcast it." Though hesitant, Marcus agreed. Together, they began preparing for their mission, gathering tools and supplies scavenged from work details. Every move felt like a gamble, but they had no choice. The alternative was unthinkable. Unbeknownst to Rachel and Marcus, Daniel had also reached a decision. After wrestling with his conscience, he realized he couldn't turn a blind eye to the atrocities occurring at Facility K9C. He sought out Laura one final time, his expression resolute. "I'm not letting this slide," he told her. "If you won't help, I'll do it myself." To his surprise, Laura nodded grimly. "Then I'm with you. But we need to be careful. One wrong move, and we're dead." With their plans set in motion, Rachel, Marcus, Daniel, and Laura prepared to confront the darkness at the heart of Facility K9C. Each step forward carried risks they couldn't fully comprehend, but they were united by a shared purpose: to expose the truth and bring justice to those trapped within its walls. Somewhere in the depths of the facility, the containment chamber pulsed with an ominous glow, its power undiminished despite the storm brewing outside. The real reason human prisoners were held in separate facilities was about to come to light, and nothing would ever be the same again. The night of the sabotage attempt was cold and tense, with a biting wind that carried whispers of danger. Rachel Monroe and Marcus Lane moved through the shadows of Facility K9C like ghosts, their every step calculated to avoid detection. The plan was risky, perhaps even suicidal, but they had no other choice. If they failed, the experiments would continue unchecked and more lives would be lost. Rachel clutched a small data recorder in her hand, its weight a constant reminder of what was at stake. They needed proof, not just for themselves, but for the world beyond this desolate planet. She glanced at Marcus, whose face was etched with determination despite the fear in his eyes. Together they approached the restricted zone, where the mysterious machine hummed with alien energy. Inside the compound, Daniel Carter and Lieutenant Laura Bennett were preparing their own part of the operation. Daniel had decided to create a diversion, drawing attention away from Rachel and Marcus so they could reach the core of the facility undetected. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was all they had. Laura, though visibly anxious, stayed by Daniel's side, her loyalty outweighing her fear. "We need to time this perfectly," Laura whispered as they stood in a dimly lit corridor near the main control room. "If we're too early or too late, they'll catch us." Daniel nodded, gripping the makeshift weapon he had fashioned from tools scavenged during their stay. "Just stick to the plan. Keep them busy while Rachel and Marcus do their part." Laura hesitated, her voice barely audible. "And if something goes wrong?" "Then we improvise," Daniel replied firmly. "We can't afford to fail." At the same time, Warden Harold Klein sat in his office reviewing reports on the latest batch of prisoners showing signs of mutation. His expression was grim, though not out of concern for the victims. To him, these incidents were merely setbacks in an otherwise groundbreaking project. Humanity's survival depended on mastering the alien technology, regardless of the cost. A sudden alert flashed across his desk console, a security breach in Sector C7, one of the most heavily guarded areas of the facility. Klein's eyes narrowed as he activated the comm system. "All units report to Sector C7 immediately. Intruders have been detected." As guards scrambled to respond, Rachel and Marcus slipped into the lab housing the containment chamber. The massive device loomed before them, its swirling blue light casting eerie shadows across the room. Rachel's heart raced as she examined the control panel, searching for a way to disable the machine. The interface was unlike anything she had seen before, filled with alien symbols that glowed faintly beneath her fingertips. "Can you figure it out?" Marcus asked, keeping watch at the door. "I think so," Rachel replied, her hands trembling as she traced the patterns. "These symbols, they match the ones I saw outside. If I can replicate the sequence, maybe I can shut it down." Time seemed to slow as Rachel worked, her mind racing to decipher the alien language. Each second felt like an eternity, the sound of approaching footsteps growing louder with every passing moment. Finally, she found the key. A sequence of runes that, when activated, initiated a shutdown protocol. "Got it," she exclaimed softly, pressing the final symbol. The machine shuddered, its light flickering as the hum grew louder then softer. Alarms blared throughout the facility, signaling the disruption. "We need to go. Now," Marcus urged, grabbing Rachel's arm. They bolted toward the exit, narrowly avoiding a squad of guards who burst into the lab moments later. The guards fired warning shots, their shouts echoing through the corridors as Rachel and Marcus ducked into a maintenance tunnel. Behind them, the containment chamber powered down completely, plunging the lab into darkness. Meanwhile, Daniel and Laura executed their diversion. Daniel stormed into the main control room, brandishing his improvised weapon and demanding answers from the technicians stationed there. "What's going on?" he barked, his voice loud enough to draw attention. "Why are the alarms sounding?" The technicians froze, unsure how to respond to the sudden intrusion. Before they could react, Laura entered from the opposite side, feigning confusion. "Captain Carter, what are you doing here?" "This place is falling apart," Daniel snapped, gesturing wildly at the flashing alerts on the monitors. "You people better have a good explanation for this mess." Their ruse worked. Guards rushed to contain the perceived threat, leaving other parts of the facility understaffed. As chaos spread, Daniel and Laura slipped away, regrouping with Rachel and Marcus in a hidden alcove near the barracks. "You did it," Daniel said, his voice filled with both relief and awe as he looked at Rachel. "But now we need to get out of here, and fast." Rachel nodded, holding up the data recorder. "I've got everything we need, proof of what they're doing here. But getting it off this planet won't be easy." Before they could formulate a plan, Warden Klein appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by armed guards. His presence was commanding, his cold eyes scanning the group with disdain. "So this is your rebellion," he sneered. "Pathetic." Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Klein and the others. "It's over, Klein. The machine is down, and we've got evidence of your crimes." Klein chuckled darkly, unimpressed. "Evidence? You think anyone will believe you? By the time you leave this facility, you'll either be dead or silenced." The standoff grew tense, the air thick with hostility. Klein signaled his guards to advance, their weapons trained on the group. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, Laura acted. With a swift motion, she grabbed a fallen guard's weapon and fired a single shot, disabling the nearest surveillance drone. The distraction gave them a brief window to escape. "Move!" Laura shouted, leading the group down a side corridor. They ran as fast as they could, dodging patrols and navigating the labyrinthine passages of the facility. Behind them, Klein barked orders, his voice laced with fury. "Find them! Don't let them reach the surface!" Reaching the outer perimeter, they encountered another obstacle, a locked security gate blocking their path to freedom. Rachel knelt beside the control panel, her fingers flying over the interface as she attempted to override the lock. Sweat dripped from her brow as the seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. "I'm almost there," she muttered, her focus unwavering. Finally, the gate creaked open, revealing the harsh landscape of Kepler 9c beyond. The group sprinted toward the landing pad where the SS Aegis awaited, its engines idling in preparation for departure. As they neared the ship, gunfire erupted behind them, forcing them to dive for cover. "Keep moving," Daniel yelled, returning fire to hold off the pursuing guards. Bullets ricocheted off the hull of the ship as Laura ushered Rachel and Marcus aboard. Once everyone was safely inside, Daniel followed, slamming the hatch shut behind him. The SS Aegis lifted off moments later, ascending rapidly into the planet's atmosphere. Below, the facility shrank into the distance, its secrets left behind, though not forgotten. Exhausted but alive, the group gathered in the cockpit, their faces pale with adrenaline and relief. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence. Rachel held up the data recorder, her expression resolute. "Now we expose the truth, no matter what it takes." Daniel nodded, his jaw set with determination. "The unified government won't like it, but the world deserves to know what's been done in their name." As the ship soared through the stars, the weight of their actions settled over them. They had risked everything to uncover the horrors hidden within Facility K9C, and though the battle was far from over, they had taken the first step toward justice. In the quiet hum of the spacecraft, surrounded by the vastness of space, they allowed themselves a moment of hope. The real reason human prisoners were held in separate facilities had been revealed, and with it, the possibility of change. The journey back to Earth aboard the SS Aegis was tense but quiet. The group sat in the ship's main cabin, their bodies weary from the ordeal, but their minds racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Rachel Monroe clutched the data recorder tightly, as if afraid it might slip through her fingers and vanish forever. It contained everything: proof of the experiments, recordings of the alien machine, and evidence of the unified government's complicity in the atrocities at Facility K9C. Daniel Carter paced the length of the cabin, his boots clicking softly against the metal floor. He had spent years serving the military, following orders without question, but now he found himself questioning everything. Was this how humanity ensured its survival? By sacrificing the lives of its own people? The thought made him sick to his stomach. "We need a plan," Daniel said, finally breaking the silence. "Once we get back to Earth, they'll be waiting for us." Laura Bennett nodded, her expression grim. "They'll try to discredit us. Or worse, they'll make sure we disappear." Marcus Lane leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Then we hit them first, leak the evidence before they can stop us." Rachel glanced at Marcus, then at Daniel. "But who do we trust? If the unified government is involved, there's no telling how deep this goes." Daniel stopped pacing and turned to face the group. "We'll start small. Find someone outside their influence. Journalists, independent investigators, anyone who can get the word out." Laura hesitated, her voice soft but firm. "It won't be easy. They control the media, the courts, everything. But maybe there's still hope." For the remainder of the trip, they worked together to organize the evidence. Rachel uploaded the recordings onto multiple data chips, creating backups in case the originals were destroyed. Laura used her knowledge of secure networks to encrypt the files, making them harder to trace. Meanwhile, Daniel drafted a statement, a detailed account of what they had witnessed at Facility K9C. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was all that mattered. When the SS Aegis entered Earth's orbit, the reality of their situation began to sink in. The planet below looked peaceful from space, its blue oceans and green continents shimmering under the sunlight. Yet they knew better. Beneath the surface lay corruption, greed, and secrets too dangerous to remain buried. As they prepared to dock, Daniel gathered everyone for one final briefing. Stick to the plan. No matter what happens, don't let them divide us. We're stronger together. The others nodded, though fear lingered in their eyes. None of them knew what awaited them on the other side of the airlock, but they were determined to see this through. Upon landing, the group disembarked cautiously, scanning the hangar for signs of trouble. To their surprise, the area seemed eerily empty. No officials greeted them. No soldiers stood guard. It was as if they had returned unnoticed, or so they thought. As they made their way toward the exit, a voice called out behind them. "Captain." "Carter." Daniel froze, recognizing the speaker immediately. Commander Harris, a high-ranking officer in the unified government's military, stepped into view. His uniform was immaculate, his demeanor calm but commanding. Flanked by 2 armed escorts, he exuded authority. "Commander," Daniel replied stiffly, his hand instinctively moving to shield the data chips hidden in his pocket. Harris approached, slowly, his gaze sweeping over the group. "I understand you've had quite the adventure. Care to explain why your mission went off the rails?" "It's not what you think," Daniel said carefully, choosing his words with precision. "We uncovered something important, something the public needs to know." Harris raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "And what exactly is that?" Before Daniel could respond, Rachel stepped forward, holding up the data recorder. "This, proof of illegal experiments using alien technology. Proof that innocent people are being used as test subjects. Proof that the unified government has been lying to everyone." Harris studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed, shaking his head. "You shouldn't have brought this back here. Some truths aren't meant to be shared." "You can't cover this up," Laura interjected, her voice trembling but defiant. "Too many people already suspect. Something's wrong. If you silence us, others will come forward." Harris smirked, a cold glint in his eye. "Silence isn't my style. I prefer cooperation." He gestured to his escorts, who moved to surround the group. "Come with me. Let's discuss this somewhere, more private." Daniel exchanged a glance with the others, silently weighing their options. Resistance would only end in violence, and they couldn't afford to lose the evidence. Reluctantly, they followed Harris to a secure conference room deep within the facility. Inside, Harris dismissed his escorts and closed the door behind him. For a moment, the room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Harris spoke. "You've done something remarkable," he admitted, his tone softer than before. "Brave, even. But you've also put yourselves in grave danger." "We didn't ask for this," Daniel shot back. "We just wanted the truth to come out." "And it will," Harris said, surprising them. "But not the way you think." He explained that while the unified government sought to maintain control, there were factions within the system pushing for reform. These groups recognized the dangers of unchecked experimentation and were willing to use the evidence to expose the corruption, but only if handled carefully. "If you release this information publicly, chaos will ensue," Harris warned. "Panic, riots, possibly war. Is that what you want?" "No," Rachel admitted quietly. "But we can't let them keep doing this." "I agree," Harris replied. "Which is why I'm offering you a choice. Work with us to dismantle the program from within, or walk away and risk destroying everything." The group exchanged uneasy looks. Trusting Harris felt like walking into a trap, yet rejecting his offer might mean losing their chance to make a difference. After a long pause, Daniel spoke. "If we agree, what happens next?" Harris smiled faintly. "You'll testify before an investigative committee. Your evidence will be reviewed, verified, and presented to the public in a controlled manner. In return, you'll receive protection, and a chance to rebuild your lives. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option they had. After a brief discussion, the group reluctantly agreed to cooperate. As they left the conference room, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were trading one form of captivity for another. Over the following weeks, the investigation into Facility K9C gained momentum. News outlets began reporting on allegations of unethical experiments, sparking outrage across the globe. Protesters took to the streets, demanding accountability from the unified government. The pressure mounted until even the most powerful officials could no longer ignore the growing scandal. Rachel became the face of the movement, her testimony bringing attention to the plight of the prisoners. She spoke openly about the horrors she had witnessed, her voice steady despite the weight of her experiences. Though some dismissed her as a criminal seeking redemption, many believed her story and rallied to her cause. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled to adapt to life after the mission. While grateful to be free, he couldn't forget the faces of those left behind at the facility, the ones who hadn't survived. Haunted by guilt, he threw himself into advocacy work, determined to honor their memory. Laura, too, faced challenges. Her decision to turn against the military had cost her career, leaving her adrift in a world that no longer trusted her. Still, she remained steadfast, using her expertise to help expose similar operations hidden throughout the galaxy. Marcus chose a quieter path, retreating to a remote outpost where he could live without fear of reprisal. Though grateful for his freedom, he often wondered if the fight had truly been worth it. The scars, both physical and emotional, would never fully heal. As the dust settled, the unified government implemented reforms aimed at preventing future abuses. Oversight committees were established and stricter regulations were imposed on the use of alien technology. Yet whispers of conspiracy persisted, fueling doubts about whether real change had occurred. One evening, as Daniel stood on a hill overlooking the city, he reflected on everything that had happened. The stars twinkled above, their light a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the fragility of humanity's place within it. "What's next?" Laura asked, joining him. Daniel shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "We keep fighting. For justice, for transparency, for a better future." Laura nodded, gazing up at the sky. "Even if it feels impossible?" Especially then. Together they watched the horizon, knowing the road ahead would be long and difficult. But for the first time in months, they allowed themselves a flicker of hope. The truth had been revealed, and though the scars ran deep, humanity had taken a step toward healing. In the distance, the lights of the city burned brightly, a testament to resilience in the face of darkness. Somewhere beyond the stars, the echoes of their actions rippled outward, shaping the course of history. Months had passed since the scandal surrounding Facility K9C erupted into public view. The unified government had been forced to confront its darkest secrets, and while reforms were promised, skepticism lingered in the hearts of many. For Daniel, Carter, Rachel Monroe, Laura Bennett, and Marcus Lane, life had changed forever, but not always for the better. Daniel spent most of his days working with advocacy groups, pushing for stricter oversight of military operations and penal colonies. His efforts earned him both praise and criticism. Some hailed him as a hero who exposed the truth, while others accused him of betraying his oath as a soldier. Despite the backlash, he refused to back down. Every speech he gave, every interview he participated in, was a reminder that silence could no longer protect those in power. Rachel, on the other hand, became a symbol of resistance. Her testimony before investigative committees brought global attention to the plight of prisoners used as test subjects. She traveled across Earth and neighboring colonies, speaking at rallies and meeting survivors of similar facilities. Though her face was recognized everywhere she went, she rarely felt safe. Anonymous threats arrived regularly, warning her to stop digging into the past. But Rachel wasn't afraid, not anymore. She had faced death at Facility K9C and survived. Nothing could silence her now. Laura struggled to find her place in the new world they had helped create. Stripped of her rank and credibility within the military, she worked behind the scenes, using her technical skills to uncover hidden truths. Late nights in dimly lit rooms became her routine as she hacked into classified databases, searching for evidence of other unethical experiments. Her work was dangerous, but it gave her purpose, a way to make amends for the years she had looked the other way. Marcus chose a quieter existence, retreating to a small outpost on the edge of human territory. He lived alone, far from the chaos of cities and politics. Yet even in solitude, he couldn't escape the memories of Kepler 9c. Nightmares plagued him, vivid and unrelenting. Sometimes he wondered if leaving everything behind had been the right choice. But when doubt crept in, he reminded himself why he had fought so hard to survive, to live free, even if freedom came with scars. Despite their different paths, the four stayed connected, bound by the shared trauma of what they had endured. They communicated through encrypted messages, checking in on each other whenever possible. Their bond was fragile yet unbreakable, forged in fire and tempered by sacrifice. One evening, Daniel received an unexpected message from Commander Harris. It was brief and cryptic. "Meet me at the old coordinates. Urgent." The old coordinates referred to the location where the SS Aegis had docked after returning from Kepler 9c. The same place where Harris had first confronted them. Curiosity outweighed caution, and Daniel decided to go alone. If this was a trap, he didn't want to drag anyone else into it. When he arrived, Harris was waiting, standing under the glow of a single overhead light. His expression was grave, his usual confidence replaced by unease. "What's this about?" Daniel asked, keeping his distance. Harris handed him a data chip. "This is for you. Everything we've uncovered since the investigation began." Daniel frowned, taking the chip cautiously. "Why give it to me?" "Because I can't trust anyone else," Harris admitted. "The reforms, they're not enough. There are still people in power who refuse to let go of the old ways. They're planning something big, something worse than what happened at K9C. Daniel's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Harris hesitated, glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear. "There's a new facility, off the grid. We don't know much about it, but they're using technology we confiscated from an alien race. Technology far beyond anything we've seen before." Daniel's mind raced. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying the danger isn't over," Harris interrupted. "And if you want to stop it, you'll need all the allies you can get." Later that night, Daniel shared the information with Rachel, Laura, and Marcus. They gathered in a secure location, poring over the files Harris had provided. The details were sparse but chilling. Blueprints hinted at a massive underground complex, and intercepted communications suggested plans for large-scale genetic modification. "We have to act," Rachel said firmly, her voice filled with resolve. "If we don't, they'll destroy more lives." "But how?" Marcus asked. "We're not soldiers anymore. We don't have resources or weapons." "We have something better," Daniel replied. "The truth, and people willing to fight for it." Together, they devised a plan. Using the network of contacts they had built during the initial investigation, they recruited volunteers. Scientists, engineers, activists, and former soldiers disillusioned with the unified government. Each person brought unique skills to the table, forming a team capable of taking on the unknown threat. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the new facility, gather evidence, and shut it down permanently. It wouldn't be easy, but none of them hesitated. They had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. This time would be no different. The journey to the mysterious facility took weeks, involving multiple jumps through hyperspace and evading patrols along the way. When they finally reached their destination, the sight was daunting. The complex was hidden deep within a barren moon, its entrance guarded by automated defenses and heavily armed troops. The air was cold, the landscape desolate, and the sense of foreboding overwhelming. As they prepared to enter, Rachel turned to the group. "Remember why we're here, not just to stop them, but to show humanity that there's another way, a better way." With those words echoing in their minds, they moved forward. The infiltration was fraught with danger, every step a gamble. Alarms blared, Guards fired upon them, and traps nearly ended their mission before it began. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. Inside the facility, they discovered horrors beyond imagination. Rows of containment pods housed unconscious humans, their bodies altered in grotesque ways. Machines hummed with alien energy, feeding off the life force of the captives. The scale of the operation was staggering, a testament to humanity's capacity for cruelty when unchecked by morality. Working together, they sabotaged the systems, disabling the machines and freeing the prisoners. As explosions rocked the facility, signaling its imminent collapse, they made their escape. Barely outrunning destruction, they emerged into the harsh light of the moon's surface, gasping for breath, but alive. Back on Earth, news of the second facility spread like wildfire. The evidence they had gathered left no room for denial. Protests erupted worldwide, demanding accountability and transparency. Governments fell, leaders resigned, and calls for unity echoed louder than ever before. For Daniel, Rachel, Laura, and Marcus, the victory was bittersweet. They had stopped one nightmare, but they knew others might still lurk in the shadows. Humanity's future remained uncertain, shaped by choices yet to be made. Standing together beneath a star-filled sky, they allowed themselves a moment of peace. The road ahead would be difficult, but they had proven that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "We did it," Rachel said softly, breaking the silence. "For now," Daniel added, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But our work isn't done." "No," Laura agreed. "It never will be." Marcus smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Then let's keep going. Together." And so, united by purpose and hope, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The real reason human prisoners were held in separate facilities had been revealed, and with it, the promise of a brighter tomorrow.